I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 210. Today's podcast is brought to you by Elite Science. Unlock your dog's full potential with a unique competitive edge solution, 1-TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a patented blend of unique fatty acid oils designed to safely and effectively keep joints and muscles at their best to maximize performance and shorten recovery time. 1-TDC is the next generation of fatty acids and is used by many current and past national agility champions and world team members. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1-TDC special offer by purchasing online at BDA1TDC.com. That's BDA, the number 1, TDC.com.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by HitItBoard.com. HitItBoard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The HitItBoard can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hititboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. In today's podcast, we are going to be talking about goal setting for big events. And I want to start off with the idea of why we goal set in the first place. And in my opinion, setting goals helps you set your training agenda. It's part of your preparation for these big events. And we also get a little bit of a feedback loop. So however you perform at the event, there's going to be some relationship to how many of your goals that you met. And then you're going to be able to set goals for the next event, the following year, or whatever it is that you happen to be working on. Jennifer, why do you set goals? Or do you set goals? Maybe Jennifer doesn't set goals. She's just amazing, but she sets no goals. Let's find out.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to set goals because I'm 100% in agreement with you. Having goals are what kind of dictates and drives what I'm training on or my training sessions or what I'm doing. I kind of often will find myself in a big lull after a big event because I haven't, set the next goal or I haven't established my training plan just yet for that goal. So, coming back from Worlds, I remember coming home and like 2 weeks of doing nothing, just sitting around because I wasn't really thinking, okay, what's the next plan? What are we working on? So I think the thing that's going to lead the training sessions, the thing that's going to dictate what you're training and what you're putting your effort on is what your goal is, whether it be, short term and maybe 2 or 3 months or a little bit long term in terms of, the career of the dog.
And I think for a lot of people, a goal that they might have is to qualify for AKC Nationals. But what we wanted to highlight is, okay, now you've made AKC Nationals, you've sent in your entry, you now need a goal for the event. And so goal setting for the event that you're preparing for is where we really want to focus today.
Mm-hmm. Before we go any further, I want to distinguish a little bit between a dream and a goal. I think a lot of us have dreams, and sometimes we confuse that with goals. I think a lot of people think of them as interchangeable. And I know that for most areas of my life, I do consider them maybe a little interchangeable, but not when it comes to sports. And in my opinion, dog agility is a sport. A dream, for example, would be for me to win AKC Nationals. That's a dream. I'm not sure that that'll happen, but that's not such a great goal, if that makes sense. An example of a good goal for me would be to perhaps hold Gitchy on the teeter until it goes down, to avoid using any quick releases, because I have a tendency to do that in local trials. Perhaps I don't want to do that in the preliminary round, so I can write that down and say no quick releases on teeters in rounds 1, 2, or 3 at nationals. And then at the end of the event, I go back and I look and I say, did I meet that goal that I set for myself? I think another goal might be, I want to increase my own ability to sprint. And so I might have some kind of workout plan where I'm lifting weights or running or doing sprints or drills or exercises without the dog at my house in a yard, or maybe I get a personal trainer. So that's a very different kind of goal than to say, hey, I'd like to win the National Agility Championship. I think of that as more like a dream. What do you think?
I think a nice shorthand for that is that goals are going to support your dreams. So if you meet all of your goals, you've got a much better chance of meeting your dream. But the thing about dreams, especially in agility, is that, when we think about these really results-based things, it's not 100% in your control. So goals are things that you have a large amount of control over.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking is, kind of separating the two. The goals are things that you can take action for. You are in control of whether you release sketchy early on the teeter, or you are in control of getting the trainer and sprinting faster. But to win nationals, there's so many external factors. You don't know what everybody else is doing. You don't know what training they're doing. And you can have the best performance of your life, have met all those goals, and your dream still not happen because somebody else has a faster dog or somebody else is sprinting a little bit faster. So yeah, I definitely think you got to look at the element of how much you control it versus those results-based goals, which you have a little less say over.
That is such a great point. And I think a lot of unhappiness in general in life, not just dog agility, comes when the reality doesn't meet whatever expectation you have. If you walk into a meeting with your boss and you happen to know that your coworker who does the exact same job makes $50,000 a year, and your boss says, okay, we're going to give you $30,000 a year, and you are expecting at least $50,000, you are going to feel disappointed. But if you walk in there and the boss offers $75,000 a year and you are only expecting $50,000, you're going to be very, very excited. So I think expectation is a really big deal. And if I go into AKC Nationals and my goal is to win, as Jennifer pointed out, I can have great runs in the preliminary rounds. I can have an absolutely beautiful, perfect finals round where I and my dog cannot run any faster, any better, and still finish second, third, or fourth place. And because the expectation and results aren't matching up there, I think you can take a blow psychologically, take some damage there, and be very unhappy when you probably should not be. And so I think a lot of goal setting is very much related to setting expectations. Okay, so I'm somebody who's listening to this podcast. I'm going to my first AKC Nationals. I don't really goal set. And now I'm listening to all these big time winning handlers talk about goal setting. It seems like everybody's doing it. You're telling me, okay, don't try and win nationals. That shouldn't be a goal. So what are some good goals? Well, I'm going to give you some very common ones that I hear from people in the agility world. And I'd like you guys to tell me if they're good or bad or how they can be improved. And I think one thing people love to say is, my goal for nationals is to go and run as fast as I possibly can, me and my dog, in every round. What do you guys think? Good goal?
Well, I think it's extremely hard to measure, right? Like how do you know you're running as fast as you possibly can?
I totally agree. A lot of goal setting, when we look at the results, should be measurable. So let's back it up again. Let's say that I'm an athlete. I'm working to achieve some type of physical performance. I can look at my practice and say, okay, on this day, I wanted to do 3 sets of 10, lifting 100 pounds. But I see in looking at it, I came up short. I only made it 2 sets, and the third set, I only did 2 reps, and then I just had to stop. I wasn't able to meet that goal. And now that I look at all of my goals during these training sessions, as we're getting closer to the big event, I see that I'm not on trajectory to meet perhaps a larger goal. But you see how these smaller goals that you were talking about, we can call them sub goals or mini goals. They can support a larger goal, but being measurable, I think, is a very, very important part of that. So here, I think the person is a little too vague. Everybody wants to run as fast as they can. Another word they might use is best. I want to run the best that I possibly can at nationals. Fastest, best. How are we going to know? How are you going to measure that? Right? So what's an alternative that someone can say instead of saying, this time at nationals, unlike my local trials, I'm going to run me and my dog as fast as we possibly can. Well, I think some easy ones are contact releases. So you may say very specifically, I'm going to immediately release my dog as soon as they come into the contact zone, not earlier and not later, because I often do both of those at trials. I release them a little too early, and then I release them after leaving them there for a good 2 or 3 seconds. Someone might say, I'm going to try and do as many front crosses as possible. And if it's a tough decision between a rear and a front, I'm just going to choose the front cross and really go for it.
So planning for an aggressive handling style.
Right. So you see how planning is very much related to your goal setting. So I think you can kind of tweak those things, but you have to have some action to take. And I think to say that you want to run as fast or as best as possible is really just too vague.
I think another one that we hear a lot from people who recognize that there's so few dogs that are making the finals, then you'll hear a lot of people whose goal is to run 3 clean. If they run 3 clean and they make the finals, awesome. If they run 3 clean and they don't make the finals, they gave it their best shot. And again, that's the 3 clean is very results oriented, and it is not completely under your control. I mean, dogs stumble, humans stumble, things happen, bars fall. You can't help that. But I think that a good alternative goal would be to not make any mental errors. And by that, I mean where the handler does something silly on course. They're so stressed out that they not purposely, but they send their dog to the wrong obstacle. So these mental errors. So that might be a better goal. And one phrase that I really love from sports is they will talk about unforced errors, right? The quarterback made X number of unforced errors. And I think that's a great phrase because it's a recognition of the fact that in sports, errors are made left and right. You can't be 100%. There's no 100% free throw shooters. There's no 100%, 2-point shooters in basketball. There's no 100% completion rate quarterbacks. Like 100% just doesn't happen. But they like to talk about unforced errors, the idea that there is a category of errors that are directly attributable to the athlete, where it was not.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because we didn't get to that end.
Okay.
And no mental errors is on my list of terrible goals. Okay. Everything that you're saying, I completely disagree with.
Right,
Unforced errors happen, and they are beyond control, and it's not something that you can predict. Okay. That's like all the Saints fans saying, our goal, the coaching staff, our goal is to not get any bad calls. I mean,
all right.
That's to me, it's just totally beyond your control. Okay. Jen, have you ever heard this one? I want to go to nationals, and my goal is to have a really good time with my dog.
Oh, yeah, of course you've heard that one. You hear that a lot from the first timers. They get qualified, they maybe haven't been, and they set that, I want to go and have a good time. And that's just, there's so many things that we could try to change about that or tweak. It's really not a great goal. It's not specific. It's hard to measure, and yeah, you can sit there and say, okay, on Sunday, did you have a good time? Well, you could probably go and have a good time and not be competing. Go out to dinner with your friends and get to watch some of the best of the country, and you weren't there with the dog. So, how do you measure that? So yeah, you hear that one a lot, and that's definitely one that we need to, clean up. We need to reassess. That's also one that makes it very difficult to set a training plan. So if I sit and say, okay, 2 months out, I want to go and have a good time. How am I going to take that into class next week? How am I going to take that into my private next week and use that to dictate and control what I'm training? Versus something that is far more specific, whether it be the contact releases or, one for me is, I'll tell you, with Swift, one of my goals is I would like to have no knocked bars. I know that one's a little bit iffy because you can get into factors like surface. But what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a decent amount of strengthening because I think that there's a lot of rear end power that's coming through his jumping, and I'm doing a lot of jump training. So knowing that my goal is focused on jumping and the jumping efforts, that's really controlling and dictating a lot of what I'm doing in the months leading up to it.
I think a great goal that would lead you to having a good time with your dog is to say, my goal is to design and perfect my into and out of the ring routine, knowing how I'm going to get my dog, from the crate to the ring, and then how I'm going to get my dog from the ring to the crate. That's going to affect the dog's happiness quite a bit in terms of what you do there, but that's something very specific that you can work on in the weeks leading up and developing that routine for you and your dog.
I completely agree with both of you. I think there's something that's maybe a little bit related, and that would be for people who generally have a very negative outlook on life and competition, and especially if they haven't had success at these big events before, or perhaps they are first timers. If you know you're that kind of person, just like with agility performance, you can create goals for your happiness. It sounds weird, but Jen kind of gave you a little bit of insight there. Something that I like to do to make sure I have a good time no matter what happens at nationals is to eat a lot of desserts.
I was just going to say that.
So
I was literally just going to say that.
So leading up to the event, I train very hard in the gym, out there in the field. I eat right. And when I get there, people are very surprised to see me order 2-3 desserts. I don't necessarily finish all of them unless they're good, but I don't hold back. And it's a little bit of positive reinforcement for me there. Something that other people like to do is spend an extra day at the site if it's someplace cool, perhaps like the AKC Invitational in Orlando. You can go sightsee, and then suddenly the feelings that you have about the trip are not based only on your performance in the ring. So I think that's kind of a legitimate goal setting, but that's a way that you can tweak it. And people use that all around the world. Right? When they go to the Olympics, Olympians do that. When it's in Athens, Greece, they're going to go sightseeing as a team or individual. They're going to take a lot of pictures. They're going to enjoy that experience as well. Other people want to stay very, very focused on just the competition. They have really good attitudes. They're not really concerned about doing poorly and then being devastated by it or anything like that. So it's something that you want to tailor to yourself. And I love Jennifer's example. So maybe we should do more of that. We should talk about some of the goals that we have coming up for these competitions. And we've got a ton coming up. We have Westminster in about 3 weeks. And then a month after that is AKC Nationals. Not 5 or 6 weeks after that is the tryouts for the Agility World Championship here for Team USA. And I think in most parts of the world, people have their tryouts there. And over there in the UK, we have Crufts. So there are a lot of big events in the spring. And what are some things that we are working on? I will tell you that it depends on your situation. And I'll give you one specific. Gitchy is actually, and I think this is unknown to people, coming off of double arthroscopic surgery, both shoulders. And they found some damage in there to the articular surface. They kind of, cleaned it up in there. And she got the PRP and stem cells. And so she is rehabbing. So we very much have goals. And our goals are even daily. Today we're going to walk 5 more minutes than we walked yesterday. Today we're going to introduce the Bosu ball and start doing stabilization work. Today we're going to look at her in the weave poles, but we're only going to do 2 or 3 repetitions. And we're going to videotape it from the side and straight on and examine her striding. Today, we're going to do the A-frame. The first contact that I actually started her back on was the teeter. And it's all planned, talking with your, in our case, orthopedic surgeon, the doctor who did the surgery, and our vet, Gitchy's co-owner. You have this plan, a progression, and you're going to work through it. And we think she's going to be ready to show at Westminster. We'll have the trial beforehand. But that's something where goal setting is a very, very big deal. Now, when I go into Westminster, that goal is going to be very different from when Gitchy was at Westminster. I think it was maybe 3 years ago. She was in her absolute prime. She went to the finals as the top seed. She did have the bar down there that cost her the win. The goals there were very, very different. They were, I want to control these turns. I want to trust her in the weave poles and leave. I want to do more rear crosses than front crosses in order to help her keep up the bars. But at the end of the day, I can look back, reflect on the event and say, did I meet those goals? And ask those questions. Okay, I met those goals and this still happened. What do I need to change for the future? There's that whole feedback loop that we were talking about. And so this time you're going to tailor it to the dog and handler. It's going to be very, very different. And so let me ask Jennifer, she talked a little bit about, I think it was more national specific, right? What you were talking about. What do you think about Westminster? So you're in a very interesting situation. And in fact, I think a lot of people are, where maybe when you're doing both events, one event might be a little more important to you than the other. Or if that's not the case, maybe one event requires a little more preparation than the other, or a unique kind of preparation. How are you toggling between the two, and how are you thinking about Westminster?
Well, I definitely agree that, most people, if they have a series of events in a row, like for me, Westminster and the Nationals, one is going to carry a little bit more weight than the others. For me personally, Nationals carries a little bit more weight than Westminster. Westminster is fun. It was definitely a great experience the last couple of years that I've been. But given a choice, I'd rather be hitting my peak at Nationals than I would Westminster. Where I'm at with Pink in terms of, kind of my goal for Westminster and how my goals for Westminster lead into Nationals is she is still very young. And last year, our series of events where she got to do some big, fun, high crowd events, right? We had Westminster and people cheering and screaming. And then we went to Nationals after that, and she was in finals there. We did the Incredible Dog Challenge. We have lost a little bit of our impulse control outside the ring and our ability to get to the ring and control. And she is kind of hitting a whole nother level of wanting to pull me in the ring, dancing a little bit on the start line, not yet breaking them, whining, barking when I'm trying to line her up. So lately what we've been really working on after coming off of such a great 2018 is really trying to control her headspace. And my concern is if I let her get too high at Westminster, 2, potentially 3 runs where, the crowd is around and people are cheering and they want to see him go fast. And she really feeds into that how that might then detrimentally impact my performance at NAC. So my goal for one of the things I'm working on is trying to change around and figure out exactly what is the best routine. I've been going to class the last several weeks and each week doing something different, like consciously writing down, okay, here's what I'm going to do for my warm up. Here's what I'm going to do and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I really want to make sure that I keep her in a good headspace at Westminster so that I can carry that over to NAC. I worry if she comes off of Westminster just high as a kite and wow, that was so much fun that, it risks pushing me a little bit on start lines, kind of that pulling me into the ring and just being a little more on edge and a little less thoughtful on the run. So I'm really making sure that as a handler, I'm diligent about what happens at Westminster so that it doesn't impact me. I think the same would be true for a lot of people with contacts. If you go to Westminster and you let them rip off those contacts and you let them do a bunch of early releases, is there enough time between Westminster and NAC to get them back under control? Do you have a couple local shows lined up where you can reinforce that behavior? So you're definitely got to kind of look planning more than just one event. You don't want to wait till Westminster's over to realize what problems you potentially created for only a few weeks later.
That is fantastic. I think what you've done there is identify a weakness and you're going to address them in training. And I think basically that's what we're doing here. People need to understand that. And once they do, I think goal setting really starts to make sense. Oh, my dog flies off the A-frame. This is what I need to be doing in practice. And not just practice, but think of local trials as extensions of your practice, of your daily work or your work at home or your weekly class. I've had runs at local trials where I say, all right, we're 3 weeks away from nationals. I don't know that I can make a front cross here. I'm not sure, but let's find out. I'm going to try it. I'll pick another run and say, I would normally do front crosses here. I'm just going to do all rear crosses or holding your contacts. I think that's a big one that a lot of top handlers do when they have stop contacts heading into nationals. And so that is going to form the basis of your training. And that's how your goals are going to inform your training. And I think that athletes are really good at doing this, having little benchmarks and check-ins. So 1 week before, you're probably going to look at Pink and say, okay, where's your head at now at this local trial right before this event? And then even at Westminster, well, where was her head at there? And what does this mean for the month that I have before nationals? How is this going to affect my training? And so I think that is a very good thing. And we had talked about it, I think, in a different podcast, right? Implementing a taper. Did we talk about tapering on a podcast yet?
I believe we talked about like planning your season and how that affects the work that you do, right before the event versus right after the event versus kind of in the middle and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. So I think you can probably link to that podcast. But the idea here is that There's no real cramming for big events. Sometimes you have to for very specific skills. The ones that come to mind are contacts and start lines. But in general, if you're having problems with, say, a weave entry, you don't want to do 50 sets of weave pulls the day before you leave on a 2-day drive to go to a big national event. You want to put that at the beginning of your, say, 8-week training cycle. You want to carefully plan your training so that you're tapering down the dog's activity so that they're at peak form, not under peak strain or duress or workload right before the event.
Here's my logical argument against cramming. And that is, especially this, extreme last minute, like the day before, you're asking yourself, well, should I do one last session of hard entries? And when you look at the range of possible outcomes, if they do it great, you feel great, but you probably didn't change anything. They had it already. And if they miss it, you feel horrible going into the event, and they may or may not miss it at the event, but there's no time to change it. So it is, all you're getting is information. 50% of the time it might be bad if we're saying flip a coin and they either get it or they don't, and it doesn't affect anything. So there's no real reason to do that to yourself.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think the next key thing that I wanted to talk about was doing the work. So lots of people are really good at setting up goals. They set them up very similarly to how we've talked about, but they don't actually put in the practice. So just remember, you actually have to put in the time. You have to make the effort. You actually have to do some things. Otherwise, things may not go your way. And lastly, you're going to get to the post-event analysis. And I think this is the part of goal setting that no one talks about and that very few people, frankly, do. They just go on and start setting goals for the next event. They kind of think about what just happened, but not in a very systematic way. Once you have an event, you have information. You have a lot of information, and failure should not be viewed in a negative way, but all too often it is. It's such a part of our sport that I find it difficult to talk with people, even my training partners or friends, about what has just happened. I will say something like, Gitchy had 4 bars and 3 of them were on backsides. I'm going to go ahead and really work on that, I think, in the next couple of weeks. And the first thing they might say is, oh, no, but, she was great. And
the dog walks were amazing.
Handling errors and the contacts were good. I'd say, oh, okay. Hey, I didn't know we were still, congratulating about the event. I'm not making a value judgment or anything. I'm just already mentally planning for the next thing. And I'm already analyzing when I look at these videos where we made mistakes, where we were weak, where we were strong, where we could be better. And then I need to partition that training time, right? If my dog never misses the weave pulls and they can do all kinds of crazy entries, does it make a lot of sense to do 90% of your training as weave pulls? No, it does not. And so I think as people, we tend to practice what we're good at. We tend to avoid what we're not good at. And you have all this information about what went wrong, and that should inform your goal setting as you move forward. And Jen, what do you do after an event?
Well, very similar to you, a lot of analysis of what just happened. So, at all the big events, you're getting your runs filmed, whether it be by your friends or your family, or you're buying the runs that somebody has done at the event. And then it's a lot of watching them, kind of seeing what things needed to be tweaked. I have watched my AWC runs over and over and over again. And actually, I've watched the runs that were clean way more than I have watched the faulted runs, and kind of made my list of like, okay, what did I leave on the floor? I mean, where was I getting beat? What things, even though they were clean runs, need to be cleaned up and need to be improved. And I think, I'm very much like you, you come off of a big event and my brain goes to, okay, what do I need to work on? What do I need to go home and improve? And it is hard sometimes. People, oh no, you were great. You were great. And yes, I'm not taking away from, what we did accomplish, but it is kind of, like you said, the action. You got to do the work. You got to identify, you got to get out there and you got to change it. You can't just say, oh, my dog walk was slow and, I got beat there. That's identifying it. You got to be actually having a plan and going out there and figuring out what you're going to do.
I really like that, because I think as dog trainers, especially especially dog agility trainers, we view ourselves as very positive in perhaps comparison to other dog sports and general pet owners, dog owners. And we want the dog, just like we do in training, to think that failure is not a big deal. You fail, it's information. And so now we're going to change something about the way we train. So you go to a big event and it's a disaster. Everything goes wrong. And I think the novice person is going to look at that and say, everything went wrong. I shouldn't go to nationals anymore. Whereas I think the experienced competitor is going to look at that and break down everything. This is where my dog first went off course. And I see now that the tunnel was obviously a very tough off course in this situation. Multiple other dogs did it. And my handling was late here because I was out of position. What are some things that I can do? I could have maybe opted for another maneuver. I needed to be standing in a different place. I'm going to look for those spots in my training. Okay, what was the next mistake? We popped the 10th weave pull. Okay, I need to practice being able to move away from my dog laterally while they are in the weave pulls. And so I think that those are the approaches we need to take when dealing with big disaster runs. You kind of want to just break it down and go one at a time. But again, it informs your training and your goal setting for the next however many weeks, months, or the entirety of the year until you get to that next big event.
Yeah, we are often positive with our dogs, but not positive with ourselves. And we need to give ourselves that same treatment of failure as information, not failure as failure. I'm a failure, you know?
Right, because what happens to the dog who can't deal with these mistakes because they get punished for it? They have bad feelings about it, right? They give up. They go into avoidance. They start sniffing the ground. They don't want to be there. They move more slowly. The same thing is going to happen to you as the handler. You're going to go, you're going to have a bad experience. You're not going to be able to analyze it properly. And then you're going to say, I don't do nationals. I don't do big events. I'm not going to go to Westminster, even though I secretly really, really want to. And so you don't want to end up in that situation. And so I think goal setting in that sense can really help you out.
The other thing that I think is important with goal setting that I'll add kind of, from the instructor side as well is make sure it's a conversation you have with your instructor, with your coach, if you have one. A lot of times I have students that come once a month. They'll come in and I'll be like, okay, what are we working on? Where are we at? What do we need to work on and address today? And they're like, oh, I don't know, whatever. If I get that response, typically the very next question is, okay, well, what are your goals? Because your goals should be dictating and directing, what we're working on, what you're training. So often if somebody comes to me and doesn't have a real good training plan, it's because they don't have real good goals. So we might have to spend a little bit talking about setting some goals, making sure that we have good goals, and then letting your instructor just know what they are so that they can help with the training session. So, like you were using the weave pulls before, I don't want a student to come in and I say, okay, we're going to do a whole bunch of weave pull stuff. And afterwards the person say, well, I always felt pretty good about my weave pulls. I didn't need to be doing that last 30 minutes. Let me know where you're at. Let me know, what it is that you're working towards. And a lot of people out there that are coaching or teaching, they might have some valuable insight as well into how to tweak your goals to make them more specific, to make them more attainable, to make them more measurable and those things. So I think it definitely needs to be something that you have a conversation with if you have an instructor or coach or someone you're working with.
It turns out that I actually am really good at setting hair care goals. I just realized this because every time I go to the hairdresser and they ask me, okay, what are we going to do today? I say, I don't really know, but I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes and I'm not going to blow dry it. And they say, okay. And then they cut my hair. It's perfect.
There you go. It's about setting expectations. And then it makes you happy and they know exactly what to do. Hey, I like that. Does anybody have anything to add? Okay, then I'll just do a wrap up.
Yeah.
I feel like I just deadened this. I felt like it was a good topic and then I just ruined it. Okay. All right, to wrap up everything that we've been talking about, goal setting for big events, you should definitely do it. That's the first thing. So if you're not goal setting, go ahead and try it out. pick an event, do it. If you're not going to a big national event, pick a local trial. You can certainly goal set for that as well. Why should you set goals? Of course, to set your training agenda so you know exactly what you need to do in training. And when you look at your post-event analysis, it's going to help you set your goals for the next event. Goal setting is definitely about expectations. A lot of times people are unhappy when the reality doesn't quite meet the expectation. And there's a big difference between your dream and your goal. And so make sure that you can distinguish in your mind the two. There's nothing wrong with having big dreams. We all have big dreams in agility. But we don't want vague goals. We want them to be very specific so we can create sub-goals or little mini goals that kind of support that larger goal. And the last thing we want is to have things that we can measure, things that we can look at and say, hey, I have met these goals. Maybe I need to set more goals, harder goals, things along those lines. Also, don't forget, once you have these goals, you actually have to go out and do it. So I think a lot of people forget that part.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's podcast. We've got to let Esteban and Jennifer go get their training sessions in to meet their Westminster and Nationals goals with their dogs. And we'd like to thank our sponsors, hititboard.com and Elite Science. Happy training.
And then the joke.
Yeah.
I want to make Jennifer do it.
Okay. Let's look one up real quick.
All right. I should have had Ethan here. He's so into jokes right now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes.
Is he not there? Oh, he went to a movie.
No,
Right?
he went to a movie.
Oh, that would have been so perfect. He would love it too. Hannah loves doing them.
Yeah, she does. 9 goal-setting jokes. Let's see if they're any
Goal-setting
good. That's not bad.
You don't have any, well, I guess the kids are still at school.
Yeah.
They've got to do the jokes. Isn't that their thing? Don't let me.
I did
and then
last
we keep
week.
forgetting, and then but every time there's no joke, people always
Yeah,
email and ask about it. And so I told Sarah, just do a joke.
I did a good one.
You did. Just, it doesn't have to be goal setting.
I
Just
know.
pick any joke. I don't even know where you look up your jokes. Now she's looking up.
And it's supposed to be on the like Laffy Taffy wrappers.
Okay.
Yeah, those are bad.
Where should a 500-pound alien go on a diet?
Nah, too judgy.
Yeah. Why did the picture go
I'm
to
like,
jail?
if the
Because
alien wants to be 500 pounds.
why did the picture go to jail? Because it was framed?
These are bad.
Well, they're clean.
Just record it with the kids. You have time to look it up. I don't want to do the joke.
All right. We won't make her do the joke, but mostly because I cannot find the one that I like.
I'm trying. Ethan's been running around telling me jokes. He's into knock jokes. That's his thing.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the best.
Here,
when little kids do it, even when they're bad, they're funny
we
because
could do
of
it
the
with-
delivery.
Yeah, I know. We could do it with all 3 of us. She could do it, and we could say who's there.
Like a knock joke.
Yeah.
We'll plan that for next time. I'll make sure Ethan's here.
He clearly wants to be left out of it.
All right. Sounds good.
If you cannot pick up on her signals.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Is that it? Is that
Yep.
everything? I think that
Yeah.
went fine. I think I know
I'll
when you
edit
said it felt like it like dropped off, but like you two both came into this with expectations of what it was going to be. They were very different, but like I came into it going, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I think it went fine. Like from my end, like people listening to it, it'll go fine.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
so.
Hopefully
Yeah.
so.
Cool.
All right. Sounds good, guys.
See ya.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.